Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what you want to see next.
A while later, as the air bubbles were emerging toward the surface, Lu Sheng gradually began to open his eyes and exited the dream space. Our boy had been carefully studying and training in the various newly discovered skills within the dream space, and after a month, he had mastered their fundamentals. His eyes were full of exhaustion, and despite having slept for more than a month, he was neither hungry nor fatigued since his mutant body had constantly taken care of nourishing him. He clenched his fist tightly, causing golden energy to appear around his body. He closed his eyes and focused. His external wounds had already healed, and his damaged organs had also regenerated. During this time, he had finally completely eliminated the remnants of power from the powerful level 10 warrior who had attacked him. Now all that remained was to wait a little longer for the small injury in his spiritual force to heal as well. He rested his hand on his knee and, with a calm gaze, prepared to stand up. Almost everything was ready, so he decided it was time to leave this place. The eyes on his abdomen activated and began scanning the area. Lu Sheng's eyes were filled with seriousness as he gathered momentum and started ascending toward the surface at great speed, creating air bubbles. The problem of his mutated body would resolve itself as soon as he left the abyssal cave. Once he exited this place, the rules being suppressed by the power of the cave would disappear. And without the help of the essence of flesh and blood from exotic beasts, his body would return to normality, and all alien cells would die. Once our boy ascended a little, something happened. The tentacles on his back started moving abruptly. He didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it must be something normal. But just then, the 4 tentacles shot backward, coiled up and grabbed tightly onto the stones, causing Lu Sheng's body to stop abruptly. His mind filled with confusion, making him turn around. His eyes spread in surprise, leaving him in shock. His attention fixed on the tentacles, and he was somewhat furious. Now that our boy was not moving, a malevolent energy began to emerge from the depths of the cave, causing a red flash to appear. Lu Sheng started observing carefully, remembering that this cave was just like an S-level cave, but the difference being that in the depths of the ocean there was a consciousness from another world, which had noticed that Lu Sheng had been resting in this place for some time. Now he was high-quality food and a good candidate. The energy became more intense as what hid within it wanted to confuse Lu Sheng into staying. But as expected, he wasn't foolish at all. Consumed by rage, he grabbed one of the tentacles tightly. Lu Sheng used his power. He grabbed another tentacle and began staring intently at the flash. He clenched his teeth and with little effort snapped one of the tentacles. The tentacle split in two, and the eye on it filled with tears upon feeling pain. Lu Sheng's gaze fixed on it. He was furious because the tentacle kept clinging to the rocks. He mentioned that he couldn't be blamed for splitting it in half since after all this was his body. He clenched his teeth due to panic and went on alert, being aware that he couldn't stay in this place any longer since the self-awareness of the cells was becoming increasingly stronger, and no one knew what problems were going to arise afterward. Lu Sheng extended his hand toward the surface, and using all his strength, began swimming toward the surface. The first thing was to get out of the cave, then solve the problem of the cells, and finally rebuild his stellar immortal body. Only with this would he be able to become a great hero again. But then something happened, and Lu Sheng's eyes filled with surprise and panic. A powerful golden energy began emerging from the immortal cells concentrated on his forehead. Lu Sheng stopped swimming, turned around, and his eyes widened in fear, realizing that the consciousness hidden in the cave had reached him and was not going to let him leave this place so easily. Dozens of red eyes appeared and began staring at Lu Sheng. Unconsciously, he started releasing energy, and his attention fixed on the eyes. He remained silent, not knowing what to do. Several tentacles began approaching our boy at great speed. He started observing carefully and soon realized that it was using force upon seeing that it hadn't been able to deceive him. He was not going to stand idly by doing nothing. He began to concentrate his power in his hand, and with a furious gaze full of determination, revealed that they were not on the same path and forcing something that was not going to work would not bring good results. Our boy concentrated the power of the cells and transformed his arm into a powerful and sharp blade. He adopted an offensive stance, ready to defend himself from the attack. Once the tentacles approached to capture him, Lu Sheng moved at the speed of light, and using his sharp blade, cut the tentacles into pieces. His eyes began to shine with determination, showing that he wanted to get out of this place alive. Now that Lu Sheng was out of danger, he moved like lightning and got away from the eyes. Upon noticing this, the consciousness, who was furious, manifested and began to roar. In an instant, he left the cave, started saying goodbye to the consciousness, and with a smile mocked it by saying there was no need for it to accompany him. Instead of feeling furious, the eyes of the consciousness filled with joy, as if it had an ace up its sleeve or another hidden plan to capture Lu Sheng. He thought he was out of danger, but then a powerful energy appeared. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in fear, making him sweat. A voice began to sound in his head, asking what he found so funny. Lu Sheng prepared to flee from this place once and for all, but just before he could move, a powerful portal similar to that of the level 10 warrior who had left him almost dead emerged behind him. Lu Sheng was paralyzed with fear, and his eyes widened in confusion, not knowing what to do to get out of this place. His body began to be sucked into the portal, and it didn't take him long to realize that this was the abyss. The persuasion plan had only been a facade of consciousness, and its true purpose was to deceive him into entering the abyss. He tried to move but was unable. The portal connected to a different space where there were several planets. Lu Sheng appeared in this place and began floating, and it didn't take long for him to realize that this place was dangerous. His body had changed and now seemed to be made of energy instead of matter. The portal started closing. Our boy's attention focused on it, and instead of panicking, he remained calm. It didn't surprise him that people who entered the abyss never returned since the only way back closed off. And although it seemed like there wasn't any danger in this place, those trapped here were lost forever in countless spaces. Lu Sheng's eyes were shining with tranquility. After thinking calmly, he realized that something was not right. The portal had not disappeared but was in another place. Only he had not found it yet. Otherwise, level 10 and 11 warriors would not be able to come and go from Earth. The only issue now was that he did not know how to find the portal to return. Just then, one of the tentacles' gaze fixed on him and it began pointing to one side. The tentacle started touching our boy's chest, catching his attention. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with surprise as he realized that it knew where the portal to return was. His mind became filled with confusion since he did not know how it could know where the portal was. Wondering if the key to entering and leaving this place lay in alien cells, he decided to stop thinking about it and go take a look. His eyes began to shine with determination, asking it to indicate where the portal was. The tentacle started pointing in which direction to go, and our boy began following the instructions, heading toward the portal. He started observing the planets and couldn't help but smile with a joyful expression. He realized that this space was truly peculiar, it was indescribable. He felt as if he were in a space of nothingness. Our boy began following the instructions of the demonic cells, and then the tentacles started moving with excitement. Lu Sheng began observing and couldn't help but smile upon realizing that the intense emotion of joy from the cells was very strong, which meant they were close to the portal. His happiness did not last long as a powerful ball of evil energy began to manifest above him. Lu Sheng froze in place, not knowing what was happening. His gaze filled with fear, making him panic, as something was wrong and the consciousness had come to catch him. The eye that was on the tentacle filled with malice, Lu Sheng became furious and started shouting, calling the tentacle bastard. This place had an exit, and it was the exit where the consciousness that wanted to catch and devour him was. The malignant energy began to grow more intense, and not long after, a giant eye and several small eyes appeared and started staring fixedly at our boy. The consciousness was happy to have found Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng began to observe the eye in silence, paralyzed with fear, not knowing what kind of warrior this monster was. The eye used its power, making a hand made of spiritual energy appear. It prepared to catch Lu Sheng. He raised his head and saw how little by little the hand was getting closer. The hand tried to catch him, but at that moment, Lu Sheng moved at great speed, barely saving himself, his gaze fixed on the eye. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and feel desperate. The tentacles emerging from his body stood in front of him and prepared to attack him, and upon seeing this, he couldn't help but panic even more. His mind filled with rage, he sighed and decided it was time to get rid of these traitors. Using his hand, he cut off the tentacles and started flying again, determined to leave this place. But at that moment, Lu Sheng stopped in place, and while the tentacles were floating in space, his attention was fixed on the eyes that were on his abdomen. He had almost forgotten about them. He tightly grabbed one of the eyes, causing its gaze to fill with fear. Without thinking twice, Lu Sheng pulled the eye out of his abdomen, and while holding it in his hand with an angry expression, he ordered it to take him to the true exit. Otherwise, he would crush them directly, revealing that if he died, no one would leave here alive. The alien cells had consciousness and thought Lu Sheng was right. It began looking to one side, indicating that in that direction was the portal. Above them was the true portal that connected to the earth. Lu Sheng began to look up and saw the exit. making a light of hope appear in his eyes. Lu Sheng prepared to leave this place. Several hands made of spiritual energy began to approach him from behind, and someone asked him not to leave and return to their arms. With a determined expression, he began to gaze toward the portal and decided to use the power of all immortal cells and concentrate all his power. The hands tried to catch Lu Sheng, but he moved like lightning and started flying towards the portal, advising it not to think about catching him. Lu Sheng approached the portal and extended his hand towards it. The hands were about to catch him. The hands closed tightly, trapping Lu Sheng's golden energy, but the reality was that it was already too late, and our boy had entered the portal. The portal appeared on the surface of the sea, and Lu Sheng's body began to fall toward the water, his eyes filled with joy and surprise. He could not believe that he had managed to escape. The eye approached the portal and began staring at him intently, vowing to catch him someday. Upon hearing its voice, Lu Sheng turned around, and upon seeing the eye, his expression changed. He couldn't help but feel fear and be in shock. His eyes widened in surprise and concern, realizing that the eye could not leave the cave of the marine abyss nor cross through portals. Lu Sheng placed his foot on the water and landed gently. He closed his eyes and couldn't help but smile with joy as he had finally returned to his beloved home. Not far from him, the legs of an animal could be seen. They were penguins, who were somewhat surprised to see a human. The reality was that the portal had brought him to Antarctica. Upon hearing the voice of the penguins, Lu Sheng turned around and his eyes filled with confusion.